The old Springfield rifle slammed back into Sutton Hayes' shoulder as the first shot cracked through Blackridge elite range, and the room, once buzzing with mockery, froze in stunned silence. 50 meters away, the red center of the target glowed, a perfect bullseye. In that single heartbeat, the girl they had laughed at shattered everything they thought they knew. Sutton Hayes stood at the gates of Blackridge elite range, her faded brown jacket soaking up the harsh California sun like an old flag still refusing to fall. Slung over her shoulder was an M1903 Springfield rifle, its wood worn smooth by decades of calloused hands, its barrel gleaming faintly like the ghost of a different era. The building before her rose like a monument to privilege, glass and steel, polished until it could blind you, guarded by velvet ropes and sharper sneers. Inside, the air would smell of gunpowder and imported leather, a place where only bloodlines and bank accounts mattered. She stepped forward, and it didn't take long. The receptionist, Logan Price, caught sight of her and sneered like he'd just stepped on something filthy. His slick-back hair and crisp Blackridge blazer screamed polished contempt. "VIP lanes don't allow maintenance staff, sweetheart," he said loudly, enough to draw a few snickers from the lounge where members lounged like kings on leather thrones. A boy in a powder blue tracksuit, Preston Hale, son of Senator Richard Hale, Sutton noted without emotion, leaned against a marble pillar, his grin wide and ugly. "They letting in janitors now," he called out, his voice oozing smugness as Brielle Vaughn, a perfectly manicured influencer, and Tanner Wells, the heir to some Silicon Valley empire, laughed along like hyenas scenting blood. Sutton said nothing. She just reached into her jacket pocket, pulled out a battered, worn card, and slid it across the scanner. A green light beeped. Logan Price's smirk twitched, then faded into something sour. But he stepped aside with a muttered, "This is a mistake." Maybe it was, for them. Sutton walked forward, boots echoing against the black marble floor, through the gauntlet of judgmental stares and whispered mockery. Phones lit up instantly, the live stream feed buzzing with captions like "Lost Girl in the VIP lanes" and "She's about to embarrass herself." Comments flooded in before she even reached her lane. "She looks like she crawled out of a surplus store," someone called building maintenance, "that gun belongs in a museum." Sutton adjusted her rifle, her braid slipping over one shoulder like a molten rope of copper under the unforgiving lights. She ignored them all, her hazel eyes locked forward, every step a quiet act of defiance. Major Dorian Cross, the head coach, spotted her from across the room and made no effort to hide his disdain. He whispered something to Professor Elise King, who looked Sutton up and down like she was a roach that had crawled onto the fine china. Sutton heard snippets: charity case, waste of time, black mark on the range's standards. She felt the heat of their contempt like a furnace but moved on, each step measured, each breath anchored. The range was a cathedral of competition, lanes stretching 50 meters under soaring glass ceilings. Digital scoreboards glowed with the names of the privileged, sons of governors, Olympic prodigies, tech tycoons' daughters. To even stand here was supposed to mean you were exceptional, or at least exceptionally connected. Sutton had no sponsors, no flashy gear. Just an old rifle and a lifetime of breathing with the trigger. She passed row after row of gleaming custom rifles, their gold inlays catching the light, their owners lounging like royalty, sipping $15 lattes and casting her side-eye glances dripping with venom. Then, like a shark scenting blood, Landon Mercer sauntered toward her. Dressed head to toe in perfectly tailored tactical gear, his dark hair artfully tousled, Landon was the golden boy of Blackridge, a billionaire heir with a custom rifle worth more than Sutton's entire hometown. His teeth gleamed as he grinned, shark-like, stopping squarely in her path. "Tell you what," he said, his voice smooth as silk but cutting like a knife. "You beat me today, you can stay. Lose, and you leave. Fair, right?" Laughter rippled through the lounge. Even Major Cross chuckled, shaking his head like the outcome was already certain. Sutton looked at Landon, looked at the hungry crowd behind him, the flashing phones, the hashtags already forming in real time, hashtag maintenance girl, hashtag surplus shooter. She said nothing. Just a small nod, as if agreeing to squash a fly. Landon's smile widened. Hope you know which end of that relic to point, he added, stepping aside with a mocking little bow. Sutton moved to lane 7, feeling the weight of every eye in the range fall on her. She caught the tail end of a conversation between two girls decked out in designer activewear, something about how pathetic she looked, how embarrassing it was that Blackridge's standards were slipping. Professor Keene's voice drifted over too, dripping with false pity. Maybe the community range would suit her better, she said, not even bothering to lower her voice. Sutton knelt and began prepping her rifle. Her fingers were steady, her breathing even. She thought of her mother, Captain Meredith Hayes, standing behind her on muddy, broken fields, correcting her posture, whispering, "Steady now, baby. Breathe with the shot." She thought of promises made over gravestones, of old calluses and cold mornings. She thought of everything that brought her to this moment, and nothing else. Landon took his place at lane 5, flashing a charming grin to the live stream camera. His fans cheered online, the feed surged with heart emojis and jokes at Sutton's expense. He lined up his first shot. Bang! 9.9, applause rippled across the lounge. Another shot. 10, another. 9.8, another. 10, Landon Mercer's name climbed the board, his scores near perfect, his fans roaring approval, the elite crowd clapping smugly as though the outcome was already written in stone. Sutton finished prepping her rifle. She rose slowly, the worn leather strap creaking softly. She approached the line. Phones raised. Laughter swelled. "Hope she doesn't shoot herself," Preston Hale quipped, drawing a round of jeers. Brielle Vaughn was already uploading a TikTok, surplus girl about to choke live. Sutton ignored them all. She settled into position, the Springfield's cool wood comforting against her cheek. The target loomed 50 meters ahead, a tiny red dot among endless rings. She inhaled slowly, feeling the air fill her lungs, her heart settling into a slow, steady rhythm. She exhaled. The last breath slipped from Sutton Hayes' lips, slow and deliberate, as her finger curled over the trigger. In that charged, merciless silence of Blackridge Elite Range, a single shot cracked the air. The old Springfield M1903 recoiled gently against her shoulder like a living thing. 50 meters out, the digital board chimed, a soft, unmistakable tone that cut through the heavy, toxic quiet like a scalpel. 10.0, a perfect bullseye. A murmur fluttered through the lounge, disbelief curdling the smug expressions frozen on 100 well-fed faces. Someone laughed nervously, trying to snuff out the rising unease. Sutton didn't even blink. She chambered the next round, her hand steady as stone, her braid swaying faintly as she moved with the kind of grace that couldn't be bought, couldn't be faked. She squeezed the trigger again. Bang! 10.0, the tone chimed once more, louder this time, like a hymn echoing in a hollow church. The lounge, once a den of jeers and snide comments, stiffened. Preston Hale shifted uneasily in his $6,000 sneakers. Brielle Vaughn lowered her designer phone for the first time since the live stream started. Tanner Wells muttered something under his breath, a prayer or a curse, Sutton didn't care which. She loaded the third round. Bang! 10.0, the congratulatory melody played across the speakers, an almost sacred sound rarely heard even among Blackridge's finest. The jeering stopped. Phones still pointed, but now they filmed in trembling hands. The smug grins slipped like masks melting under a brutal sun. Major Dorian Cross's clipboard wavered at his side, the line of his jaw tightening with every perfect note. Professor Elise Keene's mouth twisted into a shape that could no longer be called a smile. Sutton's world narrowed to the rifle, the target, the breath, the shot. Fourth round. Bang. 10.0, fifth. Bang. 10.0, gasps erupted from the sidelines. A $25,000 Swarovski-embedded rifle clattered to the floor, forgotten by a junior senator's son whose jaw now hung open. Sixth. Bang. 10.0, the live stream exploded. Comments flooded the feed faster than the moderators could keep up. Who is she? Is this real? Maintenance girl my ass, this is art. Sutton Hayes equals legend. Across the world, strangers leaned into their screens, captivated by the quiet fury of a woman they dismissed 10 minutes ago. 7th. Bang. 10.0. In the back, Vanessa King ripped off her headset, her hands shaking, her face sheet white. 8th. Bang. 10.0. Even General Clinton Ward had left his office now, standing at the glass balcony overlooking the lanes, his arms crossed, his eyes unreadable. 9th. Bang. 10.0. The melody rolled through the range, no longer celebratory, now it was a dirge for arrogance, for every sneer and insult hurled against her like stones. Sutton's shoulders lifted with her last inhale, slow and sure, a prayer offered not to gods of gold and exclusivity, but to the woman who had taught her to find her mark in a world determined to make her miss. 10th. Bang. 10.0. A perfect dead center. The bullet hole punched through the same tiny red heart of the target, overlapping the first. The board flashed 100 out of 100. Facility record broken. Silence. Not polite silence. Not stunned silence. This was reverent, disbelieving silence, the kind that fell over battlefields and churches. Sutton Hayes lowered her rifle with a slow, steady grace, her hazel eyes lifting to meet the sea of faces that had, only moments ago, wanted her to fail. She didn't gloat. She didn't grin. She just stood there, her faded brown jacket now gleaming like a suit of armor under the unforgiving lights. Landon Mercer, golden boy of Blackridge, who had smirked and taunted and thrown down his challenge with all the arrogance of a man born on third base, stood frozen, his rifle forgotten, his mouth dry. Major Cross recovered first. He slammed his clipboard onto the nearest table with a crack that made several of the young elites jump. Then he stepped forward, his boots pounding across the marble, and stopped at Sutton's side. For a breathless moment, no one knew what he would do. Then, slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand and clapped. Once. Twice. The sound ricocheted across the range like gunshots. Others hesitated. General Ward's voice cut through the heavy air from the balcony above. On your feet, he barked, the command instinctive, raw. Chairs scraped. Hands met palms. One by one, every person in that sacred, gilded room stood and applauded Sutton Hayes. Brielle Vaughn's phone slipped from her fingers, landing screen down on the polished floor, forgotten. Tanner Wells shoved his designer cap lower over his face, as if it could hide the flush rising to his cheeks. Preston Hale stared down at his sneakers, no smirk left to wear. Landon Mercer stood there, the applause washing over him like a flood he couldn't outrun. He took a step forward, clearing his throat, his voice breaking the tide of clapping. You're... He began, then faltered. Sutton tilted her head, waiting, calm as ever. Landon swallowed hard, finding his voice. You're untouchable, he said, loud enough for the live stream to catch, loud enough to etch the words into the record forever. General Ward descended the stairs like a judge coming to deliver final sentence. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, his chest heavy with decorations earned and bled for. He strode to Sutton, eyes hard, mouth a thin line. Miss Hayes, he said, his voice low but carrying. Today you didn't just break a record. You broke this range. A gasp rippled through the crowd. General Ward turned to face the lounge. Effective immediately, any staff or member who mocked, belittled, or obstructed this shooter's access will face suspension and formal review, he said, his tone brooking no argument. His gaze swept over Logan Price, over Professor Keene, over the cliques of privileged children now wilting like dead flowers. This facility was built on the foundation of skill, honor, and excellence. From this moment forward, that will no longer be an empty slogan. Then he turned back to Sutton, his face softening by the barest fraction. You are the new standard, Miss Hayes, he said. Behind him, the leaderboard updated with a mechanical hum. Sutton Hayes, 100 out of 100, facility record holder. Cameras flashed. Phones buzzed. Somewhere, deep in the archives of Blackridge's pristine history, a new chapter began to write itself, not in gold leaf and vanity, but in the raw, unstoppable ink of truth. Sutton allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Not for them. For her mother. For every quiet lesson learned in the mud and the rain, for every early morning and aching muscle and whispered correction. For every time she had been told she wasn't enough, and proved them wrong with the simple pull of a trigger. The crowd's applause thundered, no longer a mockery but a hymn to her resilience, her precision, her undeniable place among them. Landon Mercer stood shell-shocked, his custom tactical gear suddenly feeling like a costume. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He was supposed to be the king here. Instead, he looked at Sutton Hayes and realized he had just witnessed the crowning of a queen. And all he could do was stand in the rubble of his own pride and applaud. The applause thundered around Sutton Hayes, but she heard none of it. Standing there, rifle in hand, her heart steady, she knew the real victory wasn't in the scoreboard flashing her name or the stunned faces staring at her in awe, it was in the silent promise she had kept, the legacy she had carried across every mile, every hardship, every moment of doubt. She caught Landon Mercer's gaze across the shooting lanes, the boyish arrogance stripped from him like old paint. In its place, raw admiration bloomed, awkward and real, too late to save his pride but just in time to honor the truth he could no longer deny. The live stream cameras still rolled, beaming the moment to tens of thousands across the country, capturing every stunned expression, every falling wall of privilege. Landon stepped forward, slow and deliberate, and lifted his voice, hoarse but clear. "I was wrong," he said, the words heavier than bullets, cutting deeper than any mockery. "You're untouchable." The room, the audience, the world watched him surrender the crown he had worn so carelessly, watched him offer it in silent tribute to the woman who had shattered every lie with 10 perfect shots. Sutton gave him the smallest of nods, nothing more, and that simple, quiet motion hit harder than any shouted victory. Behind them, General Clinton Ward stood tall, his voice once again commanding the attention of all. "Blackridge will no longer be defined by status," he declared, the final verdict. "From this day forward, skill, honor, and integrity are the only currencies we accept here." The staff members who had sneered, Logan Price, Professor Elise Keene, others too cowardly to be named, stood frozen, their futures collapsing beneath them like sandcastles at high tide. Preston Hale, red-faced and sweating, slipped toward the exit with Brielle Vaughn and Tanner Wells trailing behind him, their designer gear and perfect hair offering no shield against the tidal wave of humiliation. The live stream caught it. All. Comment sections exploded with fury and celebration alike, hashtag Sutton Hayes, hashtag Sutton Inspires, hashtag Blackridge Revolution. Overnight, Sutton became not just a name but a movement. News articles appeared within hours, "The Girl Who Broke Blackridge, Legacy Over Luxury, Sutton Hayes' Historic Stand." Strangers who had once scrolled past stories of privilege now stopped, captivated by the raw, undeniable power of a woman who had asked for nothing but a fair shot and made history with it. In the days that followed, Sutton kept her distance from the media circus. She wasn't there for fame. She wasn't there for revenge. She still came to the range every morning, still wore the same faded brown jacket, still slung that old Springfield over her shoulder like a banner of truth. The whispers followed her, but they had changed. Now they spoke of awe, of respect, of something deeper and harder won than applause. They spoke of belonging. Landon Mercer, once the symbol of everything Blackridge had been, found himself drawn into her orbit like a moth circling a steady flame. He didn't swagger anymore. He didn't smirk. He approached Sutton like a man learning humility for the first time, a man willing to rebuild from the wreckage of his own pride. It started quietly. A nod across the range. An offered coffee after practice. Conversations that began with hesitant words and ended with easy, lingering smiles. Sutton had never been one to trust easily, but there was something in Landon's steady, awkward sincerity that wore down her walls not with grand gestures, but with consistent, quiet truths. 1 month after that day, under the soft glow of a sunset that set the range's glass walls ablaze with color, Landon asked her to dinner. Not in a five-star restaurant surrounded by flashing cameras and shallow smiles. No. He took her to a battered diner 2 towns over, the kind with cracked leather booths and a jukebox that played songs from a forgotten time. They talked about everything. And nothing, about rifles and childhood memories, about dreams and the weight of expectations, about the fear of never being enough and the courage it took to stand anyway. Sutton listened, and for the first time, Landon spoke without performance, without armor. It was messy and real and perfect. 3 months later, he proposed. No fanfare. No flash mob. Just a simple ring, modest and shining in the palm of his hand, offered under a canopy of stars out behind the range where it had all begun. Sutton said yes. She said it with a smile that cracked open the guarded fortress she had built inside herself, letting something wild and beautiful rush out into the night. They married quietly, surrounded by only those who mattered. No press. No grand spectacle. Just a gathering of family, old soldiers who had known Captain Meredith Hayes and cried when they saw her daughter in that battered jacket walking down the aisle with her Springfield slung proudly over one shoulder. Black Ridge Elite Range changed too. It had no choice. The velvet ropes were torn down. Scholarships were expanded. A plaque honoring Sutton Hayes' perfect 100 hung in the main hall, not because of her last name or her bank account, but because she had earned it with blood, skill, and unbreakable will. And beneath her name, carved deep into the marble, were the words that would guide every shooter who stepped onto those sacred lanes from that day forward: skill over status. Honor above all. Sutton never cared much for titles or praise, but even she smiled when she walked past that plaque, when she saw young shooters, kids in worn sneakers and hand-me-down jackets, standing a little taller, aiming a little truer, because they knew now that they belonged. Landon stayed by her side, quieter now, fiercer in the ways that mattered. He cheered her victories, caught her when the weight of memory grew too heavy, and never once asked her to be anything but exactly who she was. Sutton Hayes, the girl they had, marked for her faded jacket and ancient rifle, became something more than a champion. She became a legend. A reminder that greatness isn't worn like a brand or inherited like a throne. It's forged in silence, honed in fire, and revealed in the moment when the world underestimates you the most. She didn't need their applause. She didn't need their validation. She had the only victory that mattered: she had stayed true. She had fired 10 perfect shots, and in doing so, she had changed everything. In every polished room, in every gated club, there will always be those who believe their worth is written in their wealth, their lineage, their appearance. They will measure you by the brand of your jacket, the year of your rifle, the softness of your hands, and they will laugh when they think you don't belong. But Sutton Hayes' story reminds us of a deeper truth: real worth isn't measured by what you wear, but by what you carry inside. Sutton didn't argue with the mockers. She didn't throw back insults or demand respect with her voice. She let her skills, her patience, her quiet power speak louder than any words ever could. In a world obsessed with image, she chose substance. And in doing so, she shattered a fortress of privilege that had stood unchallenged for years. The lesson here is simple but profound: you don't have to fit their mold to be extraordinary. Your background, your scars, your worn-out tools, they are not weaknesses. They are the proof that you have lived, struggled, and survived. The world may overlook you, it may underestimate you, it may even try to humiliate you. But your value is not determined by their smallness. It's determined by your excellence, your persistence, and your refusal to let their voices drown out your own. When life puts you on trial in the court of public opinion, when the cameras roll and the mockery surges like a flood, remember this: you don't win by shouting louder. You win by standing steady, breathing deep, aiming true, and hitting your mark with everything you've got. Sutton Hayes walked into a temple built for the privileged and walked out having rewritten its very foundations. And she did it without becoming bitter, without becoming smaller. She rose above, and in doing so, she pulled countless others up with her. So if you ever feel out of place, overlooked, or uninvited, know this: you are not alone. You are not invisible. You are not powerless. Sometimes the ones who are dismissed most easily are the ones who are about to change everything. Thank you for listening to this story today. Here at US Edifying Stories, we believe in lifting up voices that the world often tries to silence. We believe that courage, perseverance, and quiet excellence can and will reshape even the oldest, most stubborn institutions. If Sutton's journey inspired you, if it reminded you of your own battles and your own quiet victories, we invite you to share this story with others. You never know who might be standing on the edge of giving up, who just needs to be reminded that their time to shine is coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing in the power of real stories. And remember, your legacy isn't defined by who doubts you, it's defined by how you rise.